Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be taking a look at the June 8th Virginia and New Jersey gubernatorial primary results. For the Virginians anyway, it's the Democratic primary, and for New Jersey, it's going to be the Republican primary. Virginia's Republican convention was held back in last month, so both parties had their nominees chosen at different dates. And New Jersey, of course, Phil Murphy is running unopposed, so that's not really something we need to talk about. But, of course, in Virginia, we had a not really surprising result with Terry McAuliffe completely trouncing any opposition, getting 62% of the vote. Jennifer Carroll Foy, just about 20% almost. Jennifer McClellan, 11.7%. And, of course, Fairfax and Lee Carter in a distant 4th and 5th place. The results aren't really surprising. In fact, this is around where I expected McAuliffe to end up getting. In the polls leading up to the primary, McAuliffe was always in the 40s, and every other candidate, Jennifer Carroll Foy, I think was always at like 11, and then every other candidate was in single digits, so it's not really a shocking result at all. Of course, Terry McAuliffe, being a former governor from the state who was governor from 2014 to 2018, does have a lot of name recognition. He was a fairly popular governor too. He left office with an approval in the 50s, I believe, so fairly popular governor in what used to be a swing state. The primary kind of embodies this sort of divide in the Democratic Party between the more moderate or centrist type Democrats like Terry McAuliffe and the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, embodied in more of Jennifer Carroll Foy and Lee Carter. And of course, in Virginia, it tends to be more of a moderate centrist state. Terry McAuliffe won handedly. Now, I think even if Terry McAuliffe wasn't the incumbent governor, I still think he would win this primary, being the more moderate centrist candidate, just because you have four other candidates that are to the left of him dividing the vote. But even with that, I think he would still win. Again, we had the lieutenant governor primary. The more establishment candidate won that. Sam Rasool was the progressive Democrat. He lost, came in a distant second, 25%. And the Mark Herring-Jay Jones race, Mark Herring won by 13 points. That's, of course, closer than the others, but still, nonetheless, the establishment incumbent still winning his primary, albeit a pretty divisive primary compared to the others, given how close the results was. But nonetheless, Mark Herring won, and he will go on to run for Attorney General for a third term in 2021. Now, of course, the Virginia's governor's race used to be a bellwether, an important bellwether, to get a mood in national politics. If we look at the 2020 elections, though, Virginia has since become essentially a blue state. I wouldn't say a solid blue state yet, but certainly a blue state, Biden winning by over 10 points back in 2020. Of course, we can go back to 2017, Ralph Northam winning the governor's race there by just about 9 points. This, of course, was when Trump was the incumbent president. Virginia tends to vote for the party opposite of the incumbent, so this, we would think, would be an expected result. But Terry McAuliffe has a unique strength in Virginia, not only as an incumbent governor, a former incumbent governor, but also the fact that Terry McAuliffe was able to win with a Democrat in the White House. The way Virginia usually works in gubernatorial contests is that the state votes for the party opposite of the party in the White House. So when Bush was in the White House, Virginia elected Democrats. When Obama was in the White House, they elected a Republican, and then, of course, the other Democrat was Terry McAuliffe. And that trend of going back and forth can be traced to the 1970s, which is why Virginia, I would say more so than New Jersey, was a better gauge at what we can expect to see in the midterms. Now, interestingly enough, New Jersey is a bluer state by margin, of course, than Virginia. Joe Biden winning by over 15 points. Joe Biden only won Virginia by 10. But in the last decade, New Jersey had a Republican governor, Kristi. Virginia did not. Virginia hasn't elected a statewide Republican since 2009. So given that trend, it's very, very likely that Terry McAuliffe has not only won the primary on this day, but he's also essentially become the governor-elect. Now, of course, that's a bold statement because the Republican challenger, Glenn Youngkin, certainly has potential in the race. He's certainly a different kind of Republican, at least in the way he's running his campaign, but I wouldn't go as far as to say as he has a a very good chance of winning against McAuliffe until I see more data. But he seems like a candidate that could appeal more in the suburbs. If we take a look at the New Jersey primary, the Republicans nominated Jack Ciattarelli, basically almost by 50%, almost a majority. This is very interesting because Ciattarelli was a Republican that was very critical of President Trump the entire time he was in office. Not so much on policy, but probably on rhetoric and appearance and all that. But despite that, he managed to win every single county in New Jersey, pretty handedly. Similarly to how McAuliffe won every county in Virginia. Obviously, it wasn't nearly as much of a landslide, but this is still a very significant margin for Ciattarelli going into the general election. However, Phil Murphy is a very popular incumbent governor, so I would say when looking at these two races, Virginia is going to be the more competitive one, just given its partisan nature. It's just less blue than New Jersey. But New Jersey has elected Republican governors in the past. In fact, New Jersey has not re-elected a Democratic governor since 1977. So that's a pretty good trend if you're a Republican in New Jersey. For some reason, New Jersey likes Republican governors, or at least likes electing them into office. Now, as we talked about before, New Jersey is solidly blue on the presidential level. But if we look at the last gubernatorial contest, it's not as blue on the statewide level. In fact, Phil Murphy only beat Kim Guadagno by 13 points, 13 and a half about, which is a safe margin. That's a decisive victory, but it's not the 15 or 16 points we see in the presidential election. And also, Kim Guadagno was not really a popular candidate since she was the lieutenant governor of Kristi, who at this point had an approval rating, I believe, in the teens. He was a very unpopular governor at that point, which is ironic because when he started off being governor, he was one of the most popular governors in America. He lost favor over time. During Sandy, he had peak popularity in the state. If we look at 2016, New Jersey was obviously less blue. It was only 13-point margin for Hillary Clinton. Still safe. But if we go to 2013, this is just an example of, because I pulled up the Virginia 2013 election as well. While Virginia was voting for a Democratic governor, New Jersey was re-electing Kristi by a safe margin, 60 to 38%. Kristi only losing two counties, Essex and Hudson County. This, I think, is remarkable. Obviously, Kristi is was a very popular governor. But you look at the margins of the likes of Larry Hogan, which I wouldn't say Kristi is as left-wing as, say, a Charlie Baker, who won his re-election bid by a landslide. He's probably more on par with Larry Hogan, maybe a bit to the right of Larry Hogan. And he certainly outperformed Hogan in terms of margin. Larry Hogan only won his re-election bid, I believe, by 12 or 13 points back in 2018. Kristi certainly had a tremendous amount of strength in a blue state. Again, this was after Sandy, though. His approval was sky high at this point. So I guess it makes sense why he won by such a convincing margin. But it is odd that when it comes to elected officials, New Jersey has elected more Republicans into statewide office than Virginia has in the last decade, which really says a lot about the changing political dynamics in the country. New Jersey's politics seem to be relatively stable. They're blue, but Republicans tend to get around 41 or 42%, give or take, in every presidential election since Clinton, albeit the only exception, I would say, is 2004. But in every other case, Republicans seem to have a floor in presidential elections, which is around 40%, and a statewide floor that's a little bit higher at around 42%, given the past contests. Now, Phil Murphy is a very popular governor. Polling for Jack Ciattarelli versus Murphy is pretty bad for Ciattarelli. I think he's losing by over 20 points, which is to be expected in a state like New Jersey. But it just goes to show you that things can still change. But I think as of now, the New Jersey governor's race is probably safe Democratic. Phil Murphy will probably be the first Democratic governor to be reelected since 1977. As for Virginia, I think it's still going to be likely, and again, a likely margin can be anywhere from 7 to 12 points, really, or 5 to 12 points. So it certainly will be closer than New Jersey, but I still think Democrats are also very favored to win in Virginia as well. Just not as much as they are to win in the state of New Jersey. I think both primaries, both in Virginia and New Jersey, are very significant because they're symbolic of where we are going, where each party is going as a country. The Virginia Democratic Party is going to continue to go to the more establishment direction, which is obviously moving more to the left. Terry McAuliffe is running a more left-wing campaign than he did back in 2013 because the politics of Virginia allow it to be so. And New Jersey, the New Jersey Republican primary, if it says anything, is sort of a rejection of, I guess, the Trump wing of the Republican Party. Now, of course, the Trump vote was split. Philip Rizzo and Hirsch Singh were both hardcore Trumpers, from what I've gathered, and they both lost pretty convincingly. I don't know if Ciattarelli had a lot of name recognition before this. He might have. I know he was a state lawmaker, but it goes to show you that in some cases, certain GOP parties, particularly in blue states, are moving on from Trump as he's been out of office for a while. And of course, in a blue state, he's certainly a large liability. So getting away from that, again, if Chris Christie had been, if Chris Christie was able to run for re-election in 2017, let's say for some reason he was very popular, if he was sort of a Trump Republican, that popularity probably would have tanked quite a bit, even if on policy he was a popular governor. So I think it goes to show you that in some cases Republicans are able to move on, I guess, from the Trump effect of the Republican Party. Virginia obviously stays establishment. Virginia's always been a very establishment centrist sort of state, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats that get elected. They're usually not far left or far right or anything like that. And the New Jersey primary really symbolizes that, again, in blue states, GOP parties are ready to move on from Trump and kind of, I guess, go back to their more establishment way of running things. And we'll see if that gets them any more electoral success than it has in the past. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave a thumbs up if you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new videos that we post. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.